Bentley from Eclipse Quilting, and today we're going to do a upgrade to a Viking 18.8 machine. It's basically the same as a FOF 18.8 machine. So we ship you the upgrade kit, and it's basically a new handlebar in the box. This is our ram horn handlebar. It gets its name because it has handles that resemble a ram's horn. We also use priority mail with the post office to ship, and in this box you'll get the complete package of electronics. That's everything you need to run your new upgraded machine. Plus you've got new handlebar for the rear of the machine. Okay, so to do this upgrade, you just need a few tools. A pair of clippers, or scissors will do. Don't tell your wife you use scissors. An Allen wrench. It's 5/32 size. You need a number 1 Phillips. That's the fine Phillips. And then a number 2. That's the bigger one. So the first thing you do up here on the machine is you unplug the cable that goes up to the front of the machine. And I'll just set that aside because we don't need that yet. This box is the power box. This is the power supply. And to remove it, you simply remove these 6 screws with the Phillips screwdriver. You can save these screws, but if you lose them, they're also included in the hardware kit that comes with the new parts, so don't worry too bad. So I've removed all the 6 screws, and the power supply front just lifts off. We just move it gently like this, and this is the motor connector. Has a little clip on it. You push the clip and pull. Pull that off. You have a little ribbon cable here. You carefully pull it back and forth and remove it. And now the power supply is disconnected except for this one ground screw. So you undo that ground screw. This is a grounding wire that connects to the 3rd prong that's on the power cord and goes to your wall plug. That's important for safety. You need to make sure your house is properly wired with that 3rd prong hooked to ground. Alright, so back up here, we can now see what's inside this box. The ribbon cable is still connected. We can just leave that. We have these 2 connectors. One is on the board, it's labeled needle. That's a needle sensor. See that? It plugged right in there. It's keyed, so you can't possibly do it wrong. You unplug the other connector. This is the motor sensor. It's keyed also. If you look at them, they're keyed differently from each other. See that little plug filling the hole? And if you look at these, the pins will only allow you to plug the correct one in to the right place. See, that one won't plug in, but that one will. Okay, so you're going to reuse these sensors. They're tucked in neatly behind this board. So now you can see that they're fairly long. So then you come in and remove these Phillips screws that hold this red board in place. On some machines it might be a green board, but in any case it's the old style board, and so we're upgrading it with the new stuff. Once those screws are out, this red board just lifts right out. Okay, now We'll be having you return all these old electronics to us because we don't want to have this stuff end up in the landfill. We would like to have it taken care of with ecology in mind. I'm going to clip this tie wrap here that was in the way. So now we have these 3 screws that are holding this old style box on. You can tell it's old style because it has round holes. The new box has square holes. So the factory sometimes puts these screws in way too tight. That's why I was straining on that one. These are 1032, that's the thread size, American screws. So if you happen to lose any of them, we have spares in the new kit. So there you have it. We've removed all of the old electronics except for the sensors and the motor, of course. So now we're going to look at the new kit that we have, ram horn handlebar. If you look underneath here, you can see that there's LED lighting built into the handlebar. LED lights are long lasting, and there's also ultraviolet lights built into it. You can also add more lights in these 2 positions in the future. Now these lights do burn out, of course, after a while, and it's a consumable item. You can buy replacements from us. You just remove these 2 screws, the lens comes out, and you can plug the lights right in. So that's really easy to do. Okay, so now let's finish looking at our kit. You get new encoders and encoder cables. And these encoders have springs built into them, which is very important for good stitch regulation. Some of the earlier machines didn't have springs, and that was a cause of a lot of problems. Okay, so here's our new power supply, and it looks a little different than the old one. And here's the new board. It's blue in color, has the square connectors. Now to get this mounted on, we're going to have to remove it from this plastic box. It's not screwed in, it's just placed in there. So to get it out, we slide it up. We have to kind of pull on this corner to get that little connector to come past the plastic, and then it comes out. So we're going to set it there temporarily, and we're going to mount the new box on the machine. Alright, so you'll notice that this is a little bit dirty and greasy. We're going to go get some tissue and clean that up. This oil comes from inside the sewing machine. There's a lot of oil in there. So we like to keep that clean. We just thread these through the holes. We've got 4 holes there that line up. So I'm going to put one of these 1032 screws back in, and I'm going to reuse those old ones so they don't get wasted. So you start that one in, and then do the next corner. Leave this top one out because that's where the ground wire goes. Boy, this is really tight. So I'm going to get this screw out and use a new screw there. The threads on this old screw might be damaged. So here's my new screw package. Let's pull out a brand new one. That's better. Now I'm using the big Phillips screwdriver because it matches this big screw really well. If you use the little pointy Phillips, it'll tend to strip the screw, and then you'll have a hard time with it. So now the new box is on. Here's the old handlebars. The old handlebars used potentiometers to set the stitches per inch and the speed of the machine. That's all old, and so we're going to replace all that with the ram horn handlebar. Now these screws are too long to reuse. See, this bracket is quite thin and the screws are way too long. And we can't reuse those because they'll go inside and they'll interfere with the needle bar. So you can't just go to the store and buy shorter ones because these are Chinese screws. They're Chinese threads. You'll never find anything to match. So what we do next is we get a 1032 tap. This is a tap. It is used to make threads. You can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot. Here's a little handle holder for it. This is a lot easier than it sounds because the threads are already there. They're just Chinese threads. We're going to make them into Americans. You put the tap solution on there. That helps it cut. And then you just start screwing it into the existing threads. It's a little bit hard at first. You hold this so it's straight in, and then you can feel it cutting the threads, and then suddenly it'll get a lot easier. And you know you've cut the whole length, there it goes, of thread. Then you just back it out. And you've made new threads by hand. This tool is about 10 bucks at Lowe's. Or you can have your dealer do it, or any handyman. I've already done these other four. So now we're at the point of installing the handlebar using these 1032 screws that were included in the hardware kit. You just line it up with the screw holes you've just cut, and it goes in real easily. Tight. So this is how we'll be moving the machine around using the handlebars. Okay, so now if we come around and look at the back of the machine, we can look and see where we connect the cable. There's 3 connectors in a row again. The input port is always the leftmost. So at this point you're probably asking, well, why do you have a rightmost? That's for using old style handlebars in the back. So this one isn't used. This middle one is used for micro handles or hooking to a robot. This is where you hook the Cubot and other robots, and you're able to control the machine using a robot. Okay, on some machines you have an external cable going to the front handlebar. That has its advantages because if this cable was to ever go bad, you could easily unclip it and replace it in a matter of seconds. So now we put the blue board in. You place it into the square holes and it just hinges into position, kind of snaps in. Then we put the 4 mounting screws in that hold it into place. Alright, now we connect the motor and needle sensors up. The connector is labeled on the board, or you can just go by the pin out. It'll only plug into the proper location because it's keyed. Alright, I'm tucking these wires behind the blue board so that the wires are neat. The motor connects to the motor connector. We want to push the excess motor wire back into the machine. Okay, the hardware kit includes a replacement motor sensor and needle sensor. They look almost the same. The way you tell the difference is the way the pins are. This is a needle and this is a motor. They're included in the kit in case the ones that are on the machine are bad, or in case you don't have those sensors on the machine. We also include a disc. This is the motor sensor disc. Let me get that out and show you what it does. It's on the motor pulley, and it actually runs in between the sensor tongs, and the computer is able to see how fast the motor is turning. So I'm going to show you where that goes. It's below this belt guard. You take these two screws off at the top, and there's another screw halfway down on the side right here, which I took out, and then this comes off. Then you can see the belt and the needle. This is the motor sensor, and you can see that this toothed wheel has been glued to the back of the pulley here. It's really important that this not be exposed to light. That's why we have the belt guard, to protect it from ambient light, as well as to keep your fingers out of the belt. You also want to look for dirt. Sometimes this gets full of black dust caused by the belt wearing. We have a needle sensor here which is bad, which we need to replace. The needle sensor is held in place here with a screw. You just loosen this screw. The screw has some washers on it for spacers, so they're going to fall through the machine onto the table. Can you see that? I'm undoing this long screw. Then there's a little silicone that's holding this sensor. There goes the washers. And now I just clean off the silicone. And here's the sensor. It's been damaged, broken. So we're going to take that out. This screw had 4 washers on it as spacers, and when we pulled the screw out, they fell down inside the machine. Nothing to worry about because the machine's hollow, and you just tilt the machine and here they are. So the needle sensor's bad, we have to replace it, so we unplug it, we pull it up, we push it back into the machine, pulling from the other side, we should be able to get that through. So we pulled out the old, we need to put in the new. So I'll be putting the new one in from the back side, poking it into the hole like we've been doing with other cables. We've got the cable threaded through. We're coming down and connecting to the needle sensor plug. Now I'm pulling some of the cable through into the white box, and then dressing it behind the blue board so that the cable stays out of the way. Alright, So now we're coming around to the other side of the machine, and we're going to install the sensor. It's got a little tuning fork here that the sensor wheel goes between. So to get that mounted, we put the long black screw in there and some washers. Because this is a cast machine, every single machine is a little different. Sand cast. So sometimes you need 3, sometimes you need 4 of these washers. Alright, so I'm tightening the screw that holds the needle sensor in position. It threads into the casting. A long screwdriver is helpful. I'm just being careful to not damage the lead wire that goes to the sensor. And I want to put the tuning fork of the sensor around the needle sensor disc. So I'm tightening this till I can move it by hand. Can you see that? I'm moving the sensor up and down. And I'm going to place it so that it's just sitting with that disc right between its tuning fork. Now it's rubbing, so I'm it's rubbing constantly, so I've got too many washers in. I put 4 washers in there. So it's pushing this sensor too far this way, and it's rubbing on the disc. So I've got to take this back off and remove one of the washers. So I've removed one of the washers. I've only got 3 on there now. And I'm tightening the screw up. It needs to go up a little bit further. So I'm going to try to just pry it up using the screwdriver. There we go. That's just about perfect. And then we're going to put some silicone in this second hole up against the casting so that the sensor does not move if the machine vibrates. And there it's done. We've done the replacement. We're going to test it first, and then we're going to put this cover back on. There was a beep when we first turned the power on, and a second beep after. Now those lights have different meanings. If I turn the hand wheel a little bit, we can see this light blinking. That's the motor sensor light. It should be blinking whenever the hand wheel is moving. That means the motor sensor is working, and the computer on this board can see how fast the motor's turning. This light is the encoder light. It blinks whenever the encoders are rolling. So here's an encoder. I'm going to turn the power off and plug the encoders in. You should always turn the power off before plugging in new electronics. You shouldn't plug them hot. So we have an X and a Y encoder. It doesn't matter which one you put on the X. It doesn't matter which one you put on the Y. It doesn't matter which connector you plug them into. These bottom two are for the two encoders. So now when I turn it on, you look here and you see the blinking light and the second beep. Now when I roll these encoders, you see that second light blinking. That tells me that this encoder is working. I then roll the other encoder. Same light blinks, but that shows that both encoders are working. The next light is the needle sensor light. It just went off. Now it's coming back on. So when that light goes from on to off, that means we're at needle up. You can see the needle is in the up position. If you then look at that light and I keep turning it and it goes from off to on, then you know you're at needle down position. Okay, that's how the computer tells how to park the needle. And that's what that light means. These other lights, 1, 2, 3, 4, are just like the stop light when you're driving. Red means stop, green means go, yellow means go even faster. No, yellow actually means go slow. Okay, and this light is a blue light for stitch regulation. So let me show you how that works. The red light's on, so the motor is stopped. I'm going to tell it to go in stitch regulation. I roll the encoders, and you can see the blue light turning on. And whenever I stop rolling, that stop light comes on. That's telling me that the stitch regulator is working correctly. I'm now going to stop the stitch regulator. You saw the yellow light go on. That was parking the needle into the needle up position. Now I'm going to lower the stitches per inch. If you can zoom in on this screen here. We've got a bar graph here that shows how many stitches per inch we have. The maximum is 22 stitches in an inch. The minimum is 4 stitches per inch. So when we bring this all the way down to 4 stitches per inch, that's one bar on the bar graph, and push start, then we can come back and look at these lights and the stitch regulator will do something different. Now when you roll the encoder, you stop running it, the blue light stays on. That's because it's in the special 4 stitches per inch mode, which we call basting mode. So stay here and look at that blue light while I change it out of basting mode. And you'll then see that blue light turn on and off again. Okay? Now watch the yellow light. Whenever the yellow light goes on, that means it's parking the needle. So I'm going to do a needle up. There, it goes slow and then stops. So you can read those lights and tell exactly what the machine is doing. If your needle sensor is broken, we're going to simulate it being broken by unplugging it. And you do a needle up, you go slow forever. And it never stops. The needle just keeps moving because it doesn't know when to stop. So when you plug that back in, it finds the correct place to stop and it parks the needle. Okay, so these lights are used to show us what the machine is doing. So now the machine is stopped and I'm going to change to constant stitch and start it, and we'll go with the green light. You see the green light come on? That means we're running in constant mode. It's not stitch regulated. You change the speed of the motor manually, and you have to move the machine on your own to get the stitches to be equalized. That's the manual mode. So you can see, but by these lights you can tell what's happening with the machine. Okay, so now we're putting the lid onto the machine. We want to just make sure all these cables are dressed nicely and out of the way of each other. Just push any button, it becomes active. So now we want to cover the lighting. We'll choose menu, go down to lighting, and push select. We now have control of white light, ultraviolet light, and laser light. The white is at 66% brightness. That means it can go clear up to 100%. By hitting the up arrow, we can raise the percentage to 99%, and it gets brighter and brighter. So this is the white light. I'm dimming it down until you can dim it all the way off, or you can raise it up as bright as you want. Now I'm going to go and turn on the ultraviolet lights. So that turns off the white lights and turns on the ultraviolet. They're on at 98%. If I turn off the lights in the room, you can see the ultraviolet having more effect. The reason why you would use ultraviolet is to quilt on white material with white thread. The ultraviolet makes the thread stitches stand out really nice. Whereas if you used white light with a white thread and white material, you'd be hard pressed to see the stitches. So now I'm dimming it, the ultraviolet, until it's totally off. So you can set that whatever brightness you choose. The other light is a laser light. This is the only quilting machine that has a dimmable laser light built into the front of the machine. You can mount that laser on one of these posts, and you can do pantographing from the front of your machine a block at a time. So now we've completed our ram's horn handlebar upgrade. It gives you the nice ergonomic ram horn handlebars. It gives you LED lighting, ultraviolet LED lighting. You have 5 stitch regulated modes. Most quilting machines have at most 2 stitch regulated modes. We have 5. We're able to plug and play with robots, Quilt Motion, Shirley Stitcher, Quilt Magician, Qbot. Just about any robot will plug and play with this controller. If you just purchased a new quilting machine and you have an older machine you're trying to sell, buying the ram's horn upgrade is a great idea. You would upgrade your older machine, it'll add a lot of value to it and be able to sell it more.